HOA officers broke into my lake house. I restrained them and called the police. The crisp, fresh air of the countryside filled my lungs as I pulled into the winding driveway of my secluded lake house. The gentle lap of water against the shore a welcome sound after a grueling workweek. The autumn leaves, golden and russet, shimmered under the setting sun, casting dappled shadows on the wooden exterior of my cherished retreat. But as I stepped out of my truck, an unsettling feeling crept over me. My front door was slightly ajar, swinging lazily in the breeze. My heart pounded as I took cautious steps forward, my grip tightening around my keys. This was my private sanctuary, a home away from the rigid structure of the city, a place where I could unwind without interference. Yet, something was wrong. I could hear faint voices inside, muffled and condescending, as if they belonged here. Pushing the door open further, I was met with an infuriating sight. 3 people rifling through my belongings, their hands casually grazing my furniture, their expressions smug and self-entitled. Papers were scattered across the coffee table. My liquor cabinet had been opened, and one of them, a woman with a clipboard, was snapping pictures with her phone. A balding man in an ill-fitting suit peered out my back window as if admiring his own personal view. The third, a younger man in a polo shirt with an embroidered HOA logo, held a file in his hand, flipping through pages like he was reviewing my mortgage statements. My stomach churned with disbelief. Who the hell did they think they were? What the hell is this? My voice cut through the air like a whip, and the 3 of them jolted, their heads snapping toward me in shock. For a split second, their arrogance faltered, but it was quickly replaced with condescension. The man in the suit recovered first, straightening his posture as if he had any authority over me. "Ah, Mr. Reynolds," he said, his voice dripping with feigned politeness. "I'm glad you're here. We were just conducting a compliance check on behalf of the HOA." My teeth clenched so hard I thought they might crack. Compliance check? This was a private residence. The HOA had no jurisdiction over my property, and they damn well knew it. "How did you get in here?" I demanded, taking a step forward. The younger man smirked, shifting his weight onto one foot. "You left the back door unlocked." He lied smoothly, his eyes darting away. My blood boiled. "That's a load of crap," I shot back. "I locked everything before I left. My house was wired with high-end security, and I was meticulous about keeping it secured. They had broken in. You have no right to be here. This is trespassing." The woman huffed, lowering her phone but making no effort to stop recording. "Mr. Reynolds, you're part of the Homeowners Association, and that means we have the right to ensure your property is in compliance." Bullshit. My hands curled into fists. This house is exempt from HOA rules. I fought for that when I bought the land, and it's in my deed. You have no legal claim over this property. The man in the suit sighed dramatically as if I were an inconvenience rather than a homeowner defending his rights. "Mr. Reynolds, let's be reasonable. There have been concerns about unapproved modifications, and as HOA board members, we have the authority to inspect." "No, you don't," I snarled. "Not without a warrant or my permission, which you never had." The woman crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "If you refuse to comply, we'll have no choice but to issue fines and potential liens against your property." My vision blurred with rage. These people were thieves, not officers of the law. They had broken in, tampered with my belongings, and now they were threatening me in my own home? The audacity was staggering. "You're going to issue fines?" I took a step closer, my presence looming over them. "You broke into my house, went through my things, and you think you're in a position to threaten me?" The younger man scoffed, clearly used to bullying people into submission. "It's not a threat, Mr. Reynolds. It's just how the system works." My blood roared in my ears. They had no idea who they were dealing with. My patience snapped like a dry twig underfoot. "The system?" I echoed, my voice dangerously calm. "Here's how the system works. You have exactly 10 seconds to explain yourselves before I call the cops and have you all arrested." The older man smirked. "You wouldn't dare." I pulled out my phone, unlocking it in one swift motion. "Oh, try me." That was when the younger man lunged. The moment the younger HOA officer lunged at me, everything slowed to a razor-sharp focus. His hands reached for my phone, his movements sloppy but fueled by desperation. Instinct took over. With a swift step to the side, I dodged his grasp, twisting my body just enough to let his own momentum work against him. His arm flew past me, and before he could recover, I slammed my elbow into his ribs with a dull, satisfying thud. He gasped, staggering back, clutching his side. His eyes burned with shock and fury, but I wasn't done. My left hand shot out, grabbing the collar of his cheap polo shirt, and with one strong yank, I hurled him forward. His balance failed him, and his body crashed into the edge of my kitchen island, his breath wheezing out in a strangled cough. The clipboard woman shrieked in horror, stepping back, while the balding man in the suit raised his hands, as if trying to defuse the situation. But I wasn't interested in hearing another word from these intruders. I turned my phone screen toward them, my thumb hovering over the emergency call button. "Try that again, and you'll be explaining this to the police." The younger man coughed, struggling to straighten himself, but his arrogance had been stripped away. The woman with the clipboard, however, had found her voice again. "This is assault," she shrilled, her phone still recording. "You can't just attack us like that. We're HOA officials. You're criminals." My voice was steel. "You broke into my house. You're trespassing, and I have every right to defend my property." The balding man's hands were still raised in a weak attempt at diplomacy, but I saw the twitch in his jaw, the flicker of frustration in his eyes. "Now, Mr. Reynolds, let's be rational. This is all a misunderstanding. No need for things to escalate." I cut him off with a sharp glare. "It already has escalated, thanks to you. And now, you're not leaving until the cops get here." The younger man suddenly surged forward again, fueled by either stupidity or sheer arrogance. He reached for my wrist, clearly intending to wrest my phone away. This time, I didn't hold back. I grabbed his arm, twisted it behind his back in one fluid motion, and forced him to the ground with a heavy thud. He yelped in pain, his cheek pressing against the hardwood floor. "You can't do this," he howled, squirming like a fish on a hook. "I absolutely can." I planted a knee on his back, ensuring he wouldn't be getting up anytime soon. "I have every right to detain trespassers in my home. And since you broke in, I don't trust you not to run before the police arrive." The woman took another shaky step back, her bravado rapidly unraveling. "You're making a big mistake," she whispered. I gave her a cold smile. "No, you did when you broke into my house." The balding man finally dropped the pretense of civility. His lips curled in a sneer, his earlier calmness dissipating like mist. "You don't know who you're messing with, Reynolds," he spat. "We're HOA board members. We have influence." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Influence?" I gestured around my house, where they had been rummaging through my belongings like it was their personal playground. "You just committed breaking and entering. You're going to jail." The younger man beneath me let out a pathetic groan. "You're gonna regret this," he muttered. I leaned down, my voice a low growl. "You regret it yet?" His silence was my answer. I shifted my weight just slightly, keeping him pinned as I pulled a length of rope from a cabinet under the sink. This wasn't my first time dealing with entitled idiots who thought they were untouchable. Living in this area, I'd made sure to prepare for worst-case scenarios. "What are you doing?" the woman gasped. "Making sure none of you go anywhere." The younger man struggled, but I quickly tied his wrists behind his back, securing them tight. Then I moved to a chair, grabbing another rope. "Suit guy, you're next." The balding man's face darkened, his fists clenching. "I'm warning you." I grabbed his arm before he could finish his sentence, twisting it just enough to make him stumble forward. He was weaker than I expected, too used to throwing his weight around with words instead of actions. In less than a minute, he was secured, his arms fastened behind him with a thick knot. The woman looked at me, pure panic in her eyes now. "You can't tie us up. This is illegal." I tilted my head. "Oh? More illegal than breaking into someone's house." She opened her mouth, then closed it. She knew she had no defense. I reached for my phone and finally dialed the police. 911. What's your emergency? I kept my voice calm and clear. I need officers at my property immediately. 3 trespassers broke into my home. I've restrained them, and I'm pressing full charges. The dispatcher's voice remained professional, but I could hear the flicker of surprise. You restrained them? They attempted to assault me, I replied flatly, staring down at the restrained HOA officers, who now looked considerably less powerful than they had a few minutes ago. They won't be going anywhere before your officers arrive. A pause. Then, units are on their way. I hung up and turned back to my uninvited guests. Police will be here soon. If you have anything to say for yourselves, now's the time. The younger man glared at me but stayed silent. The balding man looked pale, finally realizing how badly this had gone for them. The woman shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. Nothing? I smirked. That's what I thought. I dragged a chair into the center of the room and sat down, arms crossed, watching them like a hawk as we waited. They thought they were untouchable. They were wrong. 15 minutes passed in absolute silence. The only sound in the room was the distant murmur of the lake outside, the occasional rustle of the trees as the wind picked up. The 3 restrained intruders shifted uncomfortably, their expressions ranging from anger to sheer panic. The younger man had given up struggling, his breathing heavy with frustration. The balding man, the supposed leader of this ridiculous invasion, had stopped sneering altogether. Now he just stared at the floor, his jaw clenched, beads of sweat forming at his temple. The woman with the clipboard had paled considerably, her fingers twitching as though itching to grab her phone and delete whatever footage she had recorded. But it was too late for them. Outside, the telltale whoop of sirens sliced through the air, a sharp contrast to the stillness of the evening. I rose from my chair, keeping my gaze locked on the 3 of them. Showtime, I muttered, stepping toward the front door just as the unmistakable glare of red and blue lights flooded my driveway. 2 police cruisers pulled up, doors swinging open as 4 officers stepped out, hands hovering near their holsters. One of them, a tall officer with a sturdy build, adjusted his belt as he approached. We got a call about trespassing? His eyes flicked past me, spotting the 3 restrained HOA members inside. His eyebrows shot up. Looks like you weren't exaggerating. I exhaled sharply, my patience already worn thin. No exaggeration at all, officer. These 3 broke into my house, went through my things, and when I caught them, they tried to intimidate me into letting them get away with it. I gestured toward the younger man, still on the floor where I'd pinned him down. This one even lunged at me, so I restrained him for everyone's safety. The officer exchanged glances with his partner, a shorter but stocky woman with sharp eyes. Trespassing and assault? She mused. Looks like they're in some serious trouble. At that, the balding man snapped. This is a mistake, he blurted out, his voice taking on an air of forced authority. We are HOA officials, and this man has just assaulted us. You need to arrest him. I let out a sharp laugh, folding my arms. Good luck proving that. I gestured toward the security cameras mounted on my walls. I have everything on video, including the moment you broke in. The woman officer pulled out her notepad, glancing at the restrained trio. You want to explain why you were inside this house without permission? The woman with the clipboard swallowed hard, but the balding man wasn't done pretending he had control. This house falls under the HOA's jurisdiction, he barked, trying to sit up straighter despite his tied hands. We had the right to enter for an inspection, and this man, this criminal, attacked us unprovoked. The officer raised an eyebrow and turned to me. Your property falls under the HOA? I shook my head, already anticipating their lie. No, I bought this land with a legal exemption from HOA regulations. It's written into my deed. They have zero authority here, and they know it. The younger man groaned, his confidence crumbling. The officer studying me seemed to believe me already, but just to be sure, I pulled out my phone and tapped a few buttons. I can pull up my property records right now to prove it. The balding man visibly stiffened. Oh, and while we're at it, I added, I'd like to press full charges. Breaking and entering, trespassing, attempted theft, and assault. I met the younger man's glare with a smirk. Since he attacked me first, I'd also like to explore self-defense laws on restraining an intruder in my home. The policewoman let out a low whistle. That's a stack of charges. The balding man snapped again. You can't. We can, the officer interrupted sharply. And we will. She turned toward one of the other officers. Get them up. Unbind them. But cuff them immediately. The younger man started protesting loudly as soon as he felt the cold metal of handcuffs clamp around his wrists. This is ridiculous. We're influential people in this neighborhood. We can call our lawyers. The officer guiding him out toward the cruiser chuckled dryly. Call whoever you want, buddy. You're still spending the night in jail. The balding man, now pale as a ghost, turned toward me one last time. You don't understand who you're messing with. The HOA is about to have one hell of a lawsuit on their hands. I finished for him. You wanted to flex your fake authority over me? Congratulations. Now you can explain to a judge why you thought breaking into a private home was a good idea. The clipboard woman didn't say a word as she was led out. Her face was ashen, as though she had finally grasped the severity of their actions. Once they were all loaded into the cruisers, I turned back to the lead officer. What happens now? He shrugged, sliding his notepad into his pocket. They'll be processed at the station. Given the evidence you have, this isn't just trespassing, it's criminal breaking and entering. If you want to pursue additional charges, I suggest getting a lawyer involved. Oh, I will, I assured him. And I did. Within days, my lawyer was all over the case. The HOA, realizing the legal nightmare they were about to face, tried desperately to cover up the incident. But it was too late. The police reports, the security footage, and my lawsuit against the entire board ensured that their corrupt practices were exposed. As it turned out, these weren't just random board members drunk on power. They had been scamming homeowners for years, forging violations, fining people illegally, and even intimidating residents into selling their properties below market value so they could resell them for a profit. My case was just the tipping point that brought their entire scheme crumbling down. Within 6 months, the HOA was dissolved, their finances audited, and several board members, including the ones who broke into my home, were indicted on multiple fraud charges. And as for me, I got the perfect revenge. After winning my case, I used my settlement money to buy up several vacant properties in the neighborhood, ones the HOA had once extorted homeowners into selling. Instead of flipping them, I converted them into affordable rental properties, ensuring that the very community they had tried to exploit would never suffer under an HOA's iron fist again. As I sat on my lakefront deck one evening, watching the sun dip behind the trees, I smiled to myself. They thought they could control me. They thought they were untouchable. They thought they could walk all over the people in this neighborhood. But in the end, I was the one who won. And they lost everything.